I'd like to start with a question, if I may, because this is Actors on Actors. I am not an actor, so the whole premise here, I think, is screwed. But you are terrific. As you know, I'm a huge fan of yours. And I'm curious, when did you realize this is something you'd wanted to get involved in?
A lot of television as a child because my parents immigrated to this country and were very suspicious about letting me go out and do a lot of activities. So I stayed in and watched a lot of TV. And for some reason, watching Faulty Towers and seeing that set and knowing what a sitcom was and learning about, it seemed just like such a fun thing to do. And so I think starting at 6 or 7. Also,
Wow, that's early, and that is a perfect comedy, Faulty Towers. It's a perfect sitcom. So at least you're studying the good stuff. I think that's another thing too, is when you're watching TV as a kid, you start to weed out what's the good stuff, what's the bad stuff, and then you start to be drawn towards what you want to do.
And that was on PBS, so it sort of snuck around my parents that there were these comedy shows. But, for you, Conan, and I know that it's this, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable because I've been such a fan of yours since I was 14 years old, but I remember when I saw you take over late night, I was wondering, I was like, God, he's so brilliant. And I just was so interested and thought you were so funny, but even more so than other very funny variety show hosts.
Oh, wow,
And
nice.
I think the reason was because as someone who kind of identified as a writer, even as 14, you represent to writers who want to be performers kind of their, you're like proof of their potential.
Oh, that's nice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny that you'd say that because I always felt like a fraud. When I was starting out, I just thought, who am I kidding? I can't pull this off. But then I would rely on other people who I knew had started out as writers and then had gone on to great things. I would learn later on that Steve Martin started out as a writer, Woody Allen started out as a writer. And so I would always cling to that, it can be done. But it's nice now. It's really nice for you to say that. But I think what's interesting now is when you're 14, you're watching me and saying, okay, maybe this can be done. Maybe I could do something like this. And now you have to realize the impact you're having on all kinds of people who are saying, they watch you doing your show, and you're not afraid to have your own take on a television comedy and to do it your way, and it works, and people really like it. That's got to be very gratifying to you.
It is very nice because I think that there's performers that you admire, and then there's people who you both admire and they inspire you. And I think that that's how you were different because I really admired you, but you inspired me, which is a big responsibility.
Right.
And I think it's a little hard. And for me, it's particularly a little, it can be a little difficult because the people who are inspired by me, they're usually young girls, often young women of color, and I really don't want to let them down.
Yes.
And
but that's great that you have that feeling. I think there are people who don't care. There are people who make it to where you've made it, and they have young people come up to them, and they really do have an attitude of, I made it, I'm in the lifeboat, and they're hitting other people with the oar who are in the water. They really don't care. And I'm not going to name names, but several of them are here right now. Angela Lansbury, I'll just throw it out there. That woman, enough, Angela, enough. But I have the same feeling when young people come up to me and they say, I like what you do, or it inspired me in some way, you do feel, okay, this is the moment they're getting an actual interaction with me, and I have to make it good. I want it to live up to what they might want it to be.
So I love coming on your show, and I wanted to know what your favorite moment was in this past season.
Oh, the past season, definitely going to Cuba. We just did that about just a couple of weeks ago, but that was one of the highlights of my career. We went in under the radar. We had our camera crew fly in from Canada. We came in and said we were tourists, and then we just started shooting guerrilla style out on the streets. And the people were amazing, and the improv was natural. People aren't overly camera savvy there the way they can be in this country where everyone has their own reality show. And so it was sweet, and it was nice and really funny, and the whole thing just kind of came together and gelled. So for me, I think that was my highlight. How about you?
There's two things I remember this year. Well, one nice thing is, even though it's a comedy show, I do get to do a lot of serious stuff, and the characters going through things. And I think it comes from, my mom used to say that when you make a show this is, before my mom passed away, she said, like, just remember that for most people, life is really hard. And that's like kind of the only advice she gave. And so I was like, okay, well then how can I present that in the show? And she went through a lot. Like, she got accidentally pregnant, and she wants commitment, and these things that really resonate for people my age. I got to do a lot of those serious scenes, which is nice and rare in a comedy.
To your parents and to your upbringing, and there maybe being some tension sometimes between you wanting to please your parents and be a good, be a good person. And on your show, we've talked about this before, you have scenes sometimes where you're in bed, it's romantic. Do you know what I mean? Is that
That was very
yeah, is that
Yes.
because I know that we probably have that in common, where I am a very in my own way, I'm very Catholic. That's how I was raised, and I come from very good Catholics. And then I'm constantly doing things on my show that are completely outrageous, or going to a spa naked with Stephen Ewan from Walking Dead, and I just do it. And when I'm doing comedy, I forget that's how repressed I am. But then it returns to me the minute I'm done doing it, and I'm horrified. I don't know what's your experience with that same?
I think, and I bet this is true of you, just knowing you a little bit, which is that I think when you are someone, because I have a very A student personality, and I love my parents and was very in awe of them, so I wanted to impress them and for them to be proud all the time. So for me, I think it was just like that I had sort of underestimated what they were able to handle.
Yeah.
And it sort of had, for me, it was a maturing and thinking like, okay, well, they're actually people outside of just being my mom and dad. And they see other things that are a little bit sophisticated or could potentially offend them, but they think are good. So I thought for a while I used to be very scared, because our show tackles, we're just like a bunch of perverts. Our show is just incredibly sexy and sexual, because I'm, as a late bloomer, someone who's very titillated and interested by that stuff.
No, this is why I think it's great. This is like we should pay Variety, because this is a therapy session. But I think I come from the exact same area of very much like you, hardworking. My parents are extremely hardworking. I was hardworking. I was a great student, and then I got into comedy, and I work really hard on my comedy, but then it takes me to strange places, where I'm involved in things that are completely perverse and perverted and foul.
And you don't want to be considered like a son in that instance.
Exactly, but
Right.
it's funny that I had the same realization, which is my father he won't allude to the specific thing, but he'll say, oh, that thing you did was really funny. And then I'll think about it and I'll go, oh my God, that was this thing where I'm naked and a topless woman. But I understand that my father can handle it, because he's been out in the world. We treat our parents like we turn them into these cardboard cutouts who cannot handle the fact that you might be in a scene where you have to kiss someone you are not properly introduced to, who's pretending to be, it's just like, well, no, they can handle that.
I was going to ask you, I now watch the credits of all my favorite shows, and I was looking at it, and there's so many writers on it that went on to do other things. Is there anyone that when you were growing up, you're like, oh man, that was cool. Like that would have been awesome to be in that environment. And did you ever feel like you were on one of those staffs?
I knew that when I first got on Saturday Night Live, that was a special writing staff. It's Jim Downey, Greg Daniels is my writing partner, who's brilliant, and Robert Smigel and Bob Odenkirk, and the Turners. I just remember this is like a special group of people.
That's amazing, those people.
And then I later went on to work on The Simpsons, and it was with the original group. And so I'd be in a room with Sam Simon, who sadly just passed away, but one of the most brilliant people I've ever encountered. Just this life force, this comedic life force. George Meyer is he's up there with Jim Downey. If there's a Mount Rushmore of comedy writers, it's going to be George Meyer and Jim Downey are the two that are definitely in there. John Vitti, Jeff Martin, Mike Reese, Al Jean. And I remember being in that room, and I came in there and I was nervous. I just didn't know,
Wow.
am I going to stack up against these people, and being really scared. So that was definitely, those are the staffs that I've been a part of. And then I remembered early on our late night show, when we had Robert Smigel and Bob Odenkirk came and helped out, and Louis C.K., we hired him. He had never worked in TV before, and we hired Louis C.K. And when I didn't like stuff, he used to yell at me. He used to be like, "What do you mean you don't like it? We worked hard on this. We worked really hard." Because he had never worked on television before, and people would say, "You're yelling at the host." He'd be like, "I don't care. We worked hard on this, man." And you don't. But I mean, I loved him. He was so passionate.
Inexperience will let you do that. I used to fight with Greg all the time. And there's
Yeah.
like a bewilderment, because I bet you never yelled back at Louis, because you're like, is this happening? Am I getting
No,
yelled?
I don't. Yeah, I was just so stunned that. But also, I never felt like the boss. I think I do a little bit now because I've been in show business. I've been doing this like 30 years, and which is crazy to say, but 22 years having my own show. And so after a while, you just get used to a little more comfortable with. But to this day, Andy Richter will tell me, "What are you talking about?" in front of the whole crew. "That's stupid. Why would you do that?" And my head writer will say, "No, you've got it backwards." And I think that's what actually helps you stay sane in this business.
Mm-hmm.